recording this event. So I like to be able to give value to other people, and one of the ways I can do that is share events like this so people can see what we're up to. So hopefully you're all okay with being recorded, but if anybody's not, then please drop me an email and I can edit you out. There's clever ways of actually doing that. So please feel free afterwards to just get in touch with me and I can make sure that you don't appear on the video. But also want to thank you for allowing me to do that so I can share this with other people. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about confidence. So I'm going to be telling you a little bit about what that is, where it comes from, and what we can do to actually take it back. And just to tell you a little bit about me, I've been a coach for about 3.5 years, and up until that point I was very underconfident, had very low self-esteem, and life was quite challenging in terms of my career, in relationships and everywhere, because I didn't have that confidence. So it's as a result of wanting to become a coach, I realised I needed to work on myself to be able to help other people, because I'd be a bit of a hypocrite if I was telling other people how to be confident if I couldn't do that for myself. So it started me on a journey to actually discover how I could do that, and some of those things are what I want to share with you tonight. So hopefully that all sounds good. All good so far? Good. So I've got before I say that, I just want to sort of reassure you, because I know a lot of these free events tend to be about selling something. So I just want to reassure you from the start that about halfway through, I'm not going to turn it into a sales pitch and try and sell you things. So tonight's about giving you value. So hopefully you can get a lot of things that you can take away and put into practical use afterwards. I will mention at the very end, if anybody wants to continue the conversation with me, I'll tell you how you can do that. But for now, you can just relax knowing that I'm just going to give you some value of some tools and tips that you can take away. So I do have 3 requests. So one is, if possible, please can you stay till the end? I know you'll get a lot out of this session, and I know you'll thank yourself later. If for any reason you do need to leave, that's absolutely fine. And I run these events on a regular basis, so you're more than welcome to come back and attend another one. Also, to let you know, I will be sending out the recording to everybody who registered, so that if you do want to watch something again, you're going to have that replay to look at. Okay. The other thing I'd ask is, just if you're not used to this kind of environment, just allow yourself to be coachable. So there might be some new ideas or tools that I'll be sharing with you. And I liken it to saying, if I suggest to you to try on a new jacket, it might be a style that you've never tried before. And until you actually try it on and see how it looks and how it feels, you won't know if it's going to be good for you. So I'd just sort of invite you to actually just be open to anything new that I share with you. Okay. And also be present and interactive. So I like questions. So if anybody has any questions, please ask. And please, I'll be making this as interactive as possible. So there'll be some exercises to do. I might put you into breakout rooms just so you can have a chat in smaller groups. And I'd also be grateful if everybody's comfortable in doing so. I know most of you have, but to put your camera on. So it's much nicer for me to be able to look at some faces rather than just some names. And also, if we're in the breakout room, it will be very helpful to anybody that you're doing some work with. So if you're comfortable to put your camera on, and I don't care what's going on in the background, so if you've got laundry going on in the background or people wandering around, that's absolutely fine, but I'd just love you to all put your cameras on. Okay, so on to the main bit of the workshop. Some of you may have seen a story that I shared on LinkedIn about, which is kind of the background to a lot of the content for tonight. Because a very long time ago, I got to a point where I realised that I'd actually handed over my power to somebody else. So this is giving my age away now, but over 25 years ago, I was married, and that was probably one of the points where I lost most of my confidence. And there was a key point where I realised that had happened. And I was stood in a car park with my now ex-husband, chatting to a guy about some event we were going to. It wasn't very important, but the guy that we were chatting to actually turned to me and asked me a question. So rather than just simply responding to him, I looked at my husband to answer for me. And I had one of those moments where I just stepped out of myself and I could look objectively at myself and wondered how I'd got to the point that my confidence was so low that I couldn't actually speak for myself anymore. And I was expecting my husband to do that for me. So it's taken me probably another 25 years to then get that confidence back. But I spent a lot of time blaming that whole relationship for it taking my confidence away. But then a few years ago, when I started to learn what I know now, I realised that I'd actually given him my power and my confidence. It wasn't something that he'd taken from me. So we have to be complicit in that happening, that we actually give away things. People can't necessarily take it from you. Okay. Is that ringing bells with anybody? Yeah. Okay. So before we get into the main part of the workshop, it'd be a good idea for you guys to introduce yourselves to each other. So I'm just going to pop you into a breakout room just for about 3 minutes, so you can just introduce yourselves to each other and just say a little short sentence or two about what it is you'd like to get out of this evening's workshop and why you're here. Okay, so there is 7 of you, so I'm going to have one group of 3. So I think that's 3 rooms. This is always the challenge with the technology, is putting people into breakout rooms. So just why is that not working? No. Always good when the technology is not cooperating. Right. Okay. Okay, so I'll give you about 3 minutes. So I'll see you in a few minutes. So we've had Lynn join us as well. So welcome, Lynn. Patricia, are you struggling a little bit with your camera? Don't know if you can hear me, Patricia. You might be. I can't even see if you're on mute, so I'm not sure what's happening. Hopefully you can hear me though, but we'll bear that in mind for any other breakout rooms. So Andrea, because you were there with her, where's Andrea? Oh. Could you actually communicate with Patricia?
Yes.
Okay, that's the main thing. Okay, that's good. All right then. So on to the workshop then. So hopefully you found out lots of good, interesting things about each other. So is anybody happy to share what they wanted to get out of tonight's workshop? Anybody happy to share? Sean, do you want to unmute yourself? You're on mute.
I was just saying in the group, our little breakout room, that I've participated in a number of the workshops and done a course of work with you. And for me, it's reaffirming the information really I've learned about myself, and just having that regular health check. And I think I was saying to Chantel that I think we've all got very similar stories, but for me, I'm now in a position where I can celebrate the real Shan. So this is what tonight is for me, just that sort of gentle nudge, gentle reminder, yes, you're on the right track, and it's all good.
Good. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else happy to share what they want to get out of this evening? No? Okay, not to worry. So tonight's all about finding your confidence by taking back your power. So if I were to ask you to be confident, what sort of things might you need to do to be confident? Anybody got any suggestions of what you might need to do to be confident?
I think you need to believe in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's where it all starts, definitely. Anybody got any other suggestions?
Maybe about not being afraid to be different from others.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that can sometimes be a big block, that we think we're going to stand out from other people and they'll make some kind of judgment based on that. So yeah, brilliant. Anybody, anything else? Nope. So quite often people think to be confident you just need to wear certain clothes or behave in a certain way, but as Chantel quite rightly put, and as Irina pointed out as well, it's the beliefs that we have about ourselves that can influence that massively. So I don't know if any of you have been in the position, if you do struggle with confidence, that people just think you just have to act confident and all of a sudden it'll happen. Yeah, I know that used to be my case, and just snap out of it and just get on with it. But it's never that simple, and it's down to that belief that we have underneath. So yeah, absolutely. And just to give you a definition of what confidence is, it's a feeling of self-assurance arising from an appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities. So in other words, that belief that you have that you can do things or that you're a good enough person. So understanding that confidence in itself isn't the means to get there. Confidence is actually just the end point. So what we'll be talking about tonight is the things that you can do that can get you to that point of being confident. So you're not just pretending or faking it, that you're actually putting something into place to actually help yourself have those feelings that you can be confident in yourself. Does that sound good? Jolly good. So the first thing I want to ask you is, does anybody here do what I would call people pleasing? So is anybody, I know I can still do that, but I used to do that quite a lot, that we all get wrapped up in people pleasing. So does anybody want to sort of have a stab at what they think or what they understand to be people pleasing? Anybody happy to share?
Sure.
I think saying what you think that person wants to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
So not necessarily saying what you want to say, but saying what you think, satisfying the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. Regardless of whether it's true or you want to say it or not. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody, anything else?
I think it's about wanting to be likable, liked by everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So I'm just going to see, again, relying on the technology, just share my screen with you. So hopefully everybody can see that. Can everybody see that? Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, good, thank you. I couldn't see anybody nodding then for a minute. So this is just some different reasons why we people please. So I'll just go through these. So top one is to avoid conflict. So I think that tends to be quite a big one with people pleasing, is it's easier to go along with what other people want rather than actually saying what you actually want, just because you want to avoid an argument or a disagreement, or as somebody mentioned before, as Irina actually mentioned before, that you don't want to stand out. So sometimes it's easier to just go along than cause any conflict. It could be because was our role in childhood, so it's learnt behaviour. Quite often, if other people in your family are people pleasers, you think that's the best way to behave because it's all you ever learnt as a child. So it can be for that reason. Our self-worth is tied into helping others. I'll talk about that in a bit more detail afterwards, because it's not always a bad thing, but it can be that you feel good just by helping other people. It could be that seeing other people happy can be the only way you can be happy, because you are able to be happy within yourself, for yourself, if that makes sense. We receive praise, so it could be if we go along with what other people say, as Irina was saying, that they like us. We've not figured out our boundaries. I'll be talking a lot more about boundaries in a second. And we want to help others but don't want to be helped. And I think that can actually be a bit broader than want to be helped, because a lot of the women that I work with, they actually struggle to ask for help because they don't think they deserve it, or they're just not used to doing it, or they're the strong one in the family, so they never ask for help. So I think it's a bit broader than just don't want to be helped. Okay. Is any of that ringing bells with anybody? Trying to figure out how to stop sharing my screen now. Bear with me. No. Right, bear with me. I've done this before and it's, oh, there we go. Right, there's a button hidden at the top. Right, you're all back. Sorry, ask that again. So is there anybody that rings a bell with that they recognise some of those reasons for people pleasing there? Yeah, okay. So another reason it can be living up to other people's expectations. I need to add to that slide. But it could be from our partner, our parents, that we think we need to go along with what they want because they put their expectations on what you should live your life as. And also it could just be a difficulty in actually saying no to people. Some people find that quite challenging. Anybody relate to that as well? Yeah. And we end up taking on way too much and we can get overwhelmed. Yeah. Which again brings its own problems and it brings around a whole cycle. Yeah. Okay. So, and I wanted to come back to one point about some people getting their own sense of self-worth from helping other people. And sometimes that can be okay. I think where it becomes a problem is where it becomes detrimental to you. So I know, especially women who are mothers, they get a lot of joy out of seeing their children happy, and they're quite happy to make sacrifices themselves, which is a perfectly natural and normal thing to do. But it's when that behaviour starts turning into you're always doing that and you never come top of the list and it starts to affect you. So that's when it can become a problem. So I just wanted to make that distinction between helping people or making people happy because it fulfills you and when it becomes to your detriment. Okay, good. So do people understand what I mean by setting boundaries? Because I know it was referred to on that slide. Yeah. Okay. And if anybody's not clear on what I mean by boundaries, so it's basically behaviour that you will or won't allow from somebody. And the best analogy I can actually give is if you imagine your property, and if somebody comes onto your property, you might not want them there, they could be trespassing, but it's how do you know that they're on your property? Anybody want to have a guess?
They mess around and spoil the property.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But also they need to have crossed a boundary to be on your property. So they've crossed a line that will be around your property. So there's the demarcation between what's your property and what's not your property. So I like just use that as a bit of an analogy because this is basically what boundaries are, that you need to draw a line in the sand, basically. And if people cross that line, they've breached your boundaries. What I mean by boundaries are how you want people to treat you. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And if you're not setting boundaries, you end up actually giving something away from yourself because people, as Irina was saying, they can come in and mess around and trample all over you. So it's a good idea to establish boundaries. And even if it's in relationships that are current and ongoing and you're not used to doing that, you can still start to make changes to enforce those if you're not getting what you want out of a situation or a relationship. Okay. And there's a great quote by a guy called Stephen Covey who said he teaches people how to treat him by what he will allow. So that's basically that line in the sand of what you will and you won't accept. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is, if you haven't done this exercise already or anything like this exercise, I'd like you to write down a list of how you want people to treat you. So that could be with respect, with kindness, that kind of thing. So just write down, just spend a few minutes writing down a list of how you want people to treat you. Does everybody understand that exercise? Okay, good. Okay, is everybody done? Everybody finished? Yep, okay. So are any surprises on that list for anybody, or does that seem fairly straightforward? Sean's nodding. Yeah, was that an easy exercise to do, or has anybody done that before? Yep, okay. So I just want you to have a look down that list, and as you look down that list, are there any things on there that give you a slightly uncomfortable feeling that you're not getting that in your life at the moment, or you wouldn't feel happy about asking people to treat you with respect, for example? And just put a little asterisk next to any that are giving you a little bit of an emotional reaction, or you're getting some sort of negative feeling about. Okay. And then what I'd like to do is just pop you into a breakout room again, and if you're comfortable doing that, you don't need to sort of go into masses of detail with a backstory about it, so if you're not comfortable to share, but it might just be useful to just say to somebody which of those on the list you're not feeling very comfortable about doing, maybe 1 or 2 reasons as to why. Does that sound okay for everybody? Yeah, okay. Putting you into these groups, I know Gurpreet's having a few issues with her speakers, so she might not be able to actually communicate with anybody because she's just messaging me in the chat at the moment. So I might put Gurpreet into a group of 3. I might have 2 groups of 3 then. Okay, we'll do 3 groups of 2 3s, so that Gurpreet can be in one of those to just sort of listen in, but she may not be able to share. Okay. All right, so I'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes to do that, and I'll see you back here shortly. So again, hopefully, well, that's good, it's put Gurpreet into a 3 already. Okay, so I'll see you all in about 5 or 6 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. I think everybody's back. Yeah. So how was that sharing? Yep. Anybody comfortable to share with what cropped up or what they discussed? You happy to share, Chantal?
Yeah, so I was just saying that I've got, I suppose, 4 things. So I want people to treat me fairly, with understanding and compassion, and equally. But there's 3 of those areas that I feel uncomfortable tackling, I suppose, and that is the understanding, compassion, and equally. I'm quite comfortable when I feel like I'm being treated unfairly to stand up and say that's wrong. But when I feel that somebody's treating me with isn't understanding me or isn't compassionate to my feelings, or work pressures, or treating me equally, then that's where I really struggle to stand up and say that that's wrong or it's not fair. So that's where I currently am, I think.
Okay. And if people are treating you unfairly and you're not able to speak up for yourself, what do you think's behind that?
I think it goes back to that people pleasing kind of attitude. I don't want to make somebody else feel bad or negative for how I'm feeling, so I would rather just let it go, or internalize that emotion rather than verbalize.
And what do you think would happen if you did speak up for yourself and put your point of view across?
I'm not sure, and I think that's what worries me the most. So some of that could be down to work relationships and where I sit within my role within my employment. If I spoke up, would that be affected? And then within personal relationships, I don't want to lose friendships by confronting something that isn't making me happy, but I allow to happen.
Yeah.
So it feels like I've allowed things to happen for so long, and now all of a sudden I'm going to say, well, actually, no. It feels a bit contradictory.
Yeah, and I'll come on to some ways to actually deal with that, so you're not going around causing arguments everywhere. So don't worry about that, because it can feel a bit daunting to start with. So I'll give you some tips around that. But is it okay to just ask you a few more questions about that? So what is it that stops you asking for what you want then, if in those sort of terms where you're not being treated fairly?
I don't know. If I'm perfectly honest, I don't know what stops me, other than I don't want the conflict. I don't want the what ifs and the buts, and well, I'm not doing that. I don't want that confrontation with somebody, and I'd rather just not deal with it, if I'm perfectly honest.
Okay, and just turning that round slightly differently. So if somebody else said to you that you weren't treating them fairly, for example, I'm not saying you would, because I'm sure you wouldn't actually, but would you think that they were perfectly within their right to voice their opinion to you?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'd be absolutely mortified if somebody thought I wasn't treating them fairly, and I would do everything in my power to correct my behaviour. So
okay, so why is it a problem the other way around then?
I suppose it's not, but I can feel myself getting afraid. Just the thought of it, and my anxiety levels are just like,
So okay, so to not be able to sort of articulate that you feel like you're being treated unfairly, what belief must you have about yourself?
I don't deserve to be treated fairly.
Okay, I thought that might be behind it. Just need to do a bit of digging. And where does that belief come from, if you're happy to share?
I don't know. I suppose it's the way I've allowed people to probably treat me, or situations that have unfolded over years, I suppose, of just letting things slip and slide and not really ever addressing it. So because of that, I think that's reinforced my feelings that, if I don't have the ability to stand up for myself, then why would I expect somebody to then treat me the way I expect to be treated?
There is that. I mean, you would hope people would treat you fairly anyway, but it's if there's that belief that you've got that you don't deserve to be treated that way, then it's going to be more difficult for you to expect to be treated that way. So again, if you're happy to share, I assume from what you've said that this has been there for quite a long time. So I'm assuming going back to your childhood even.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And are there any particular incidents or scenarios from when you were young that stand out more than others of that kind of not deserving things sort of crops up?
Not, I mean, I suppose with every childhood you have your circle of friends and those kind of relationships where I suppose you're always, I suppose, a little bit on the outside and not really included in everything else that's going on around you, or at least you feel like that. I suppose I'm the younger sibling, there's two of us, and I have that feeling where lots of siblings think that their brother or sister's treated better than them, which isn't the case in the slightest. I have an amazing relationship with my family, but I suppose it just comes from those insecurities and have just developed over time.
So does it feel like it's from your sibling, that with having an older sibling, there's something there from?
I mean, there might be, because I'm constantly telling my mum that she prefers him to me and he gets treated better. So, you know, I suppose internally that might be more than what I'm, you know, jokingly saying out loud.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose it's something I've never really thought about or explored in any detail.
Okay. But is it feeling like that could be the root of it?
I suppose it's one of the, yeah. And I think friendship circles over the years, I've moved around a few times when I was younger, so I never had that like long-term relationship with anybody. And the worst person in the world for keeping in touch with people. Mm-hmm. So there's short-term relationships always, and I don't really invest in friendships as much as I probably should. I'm probably right back down to that. That's why I don't, you know.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm treated fairly.
Right. Okay. Because just picking up on you saying, you say to your mum that your brother gets preferential treatment, I'm assuming. And when you say that to your mum, what does she say?
Well, she tells me I'm crackers. It's not the case, essentially. And it really isn't the case. If anything, I get treated better than he does. But I suppose as a child, when you're young and you see your brother being allowed to do things because he's older than me, so he's a few years older than me, so he's always had those additional things than I have. Mm-hmm. Due to his age. I suppose. I mean, I'm sure most siblings feel like that.
It's to some degree, yeah. So looking back now, and I think you've already said it anyway, but is that belief that you have about yourself that you're not treated fairly and that you don't deserve things, is that actually true?
Probably not, no.
Okay.
No.
And how do you think you could be instead? So if you could flip that belief around, how would you want to be instead?
I don't know, that's a really tricky one to answer, I think.
In an ideal world, you could have whatever you wanted.
I think I'd just be like, treated as I expect to be treated. I want people to value me for who I am and understand me, I suppose.
Yeah. So how would life be different if people treated you like that?
Oh, so much better. I suppose less pressure, less anxiety. I suppose better communication. Mm-hmm. I don't really talk about things to anybody, so I suppose I'd be a bit more of an open book if I felt comfortable to be able to do that.
Yeah. Does that feel good though?
Yeah.
So if you're looking back to that, you don't deserve things and you're not treated fairly, because you already acknowledged that your mum said that's not true, and as an adult you know it's not true, but it still lingers. So if you think about it from the point of view, that's the story that you've been repeating to yourself for a long time. And if it's just a story, then it's not true. And if I said to you that you could have a choice at the moment, you could have a choice to just let that story go and adopt a new story that you do deserve to be treated fairly and how much better you feel. How does that sound?
It feels great.
Yeah. So is it okay to let that go, that story?
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Has that helped?
Yes, thank you.
Good. Okay, you're welcome. We'll talk a bit more about stories that we tell ourselves in a moment, but thank you for sharing that, Chantel. Okay. Very brave of you to speak up on something like this, so thank you. Okay. Anybody got anything else they'd like to share that cropped up when they were talking about how they want to be treated? Were there any surprises on there, or anything that surprised you that it felt uncomfortable when you read through that list? No? Okay. Right, we shall move on then. So, as I just mentioned, we'll talk a bit more about the stories that we tell ourselves, because whether we realise it or not, we do actually tell ourselves a lot of stories about what's happened in our lives. And sometimes those stories can keep us stuck and keep us disempowered. And it's about recognising where we are telling ourselves stories and then what we can do about it. And what can happen, as we've just discussed with Chantel, is that by repeating those stories, we then adopt it as a belief, and in our subconscious that belief becomes our reality as well. And it can sometimes be quite hard to shake off, because unconsciously we believe it's absolutely true, even though when we look at it logically as adults, we can probably see that it's not true. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So one thing, as you probably gathered from the story that I told right at the start, which I think Lynn had missed, is that I used to tell myself that I wasn't important and then people didn't listen to me, which then sort of caused that situation where I wasn't able to speak up for myself. I used to try and hide in the background because I didn't want to stand out. And that used to affect me at work, it affected me socially, and it affected me in relationships. So if anybody had met me 3.5 years ago, the last thing that I would be doing is running a workshop like this, because that would have absolutely terrified me, the fact that I'd be speaking in front of a group of people. So for me to have come that far, if, like I said, if you'd met me, you would think there was a major transformation in the person that you see today. So, and we can even adopt other people's stories as our own. So it can be things that our parents tell us. So sometimes it's a belief that we create for ourselves, but sometimes if you've got a parent telling you that you're not good enough, or you're not worthy, or you're stupid, or things like that, we can adopt that as a belief of our own as well. and it can often be concerned with what other people think of us. So we can often get caught up in worrying about what other people think. And there's a quote that I've shared. I'm not sure I should share this because I can never remember it. Sian's probably heard this countless times, and Suda probably has as well from previous workshops. I will have a go, but it's, we're not who we think we are, and I'll start that again. I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who you think I am. I am who you think. See, messed it up. I'll start again. I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who you think I am. Something like that, anyway. But basically what that's saying is we don't actually see the world, we don't actually see reality as it is. We see it as we are, because we're always projecting our own beliefs, our emotions, whatever mood we're in at the time, onto it. So everybody has a different perception of reality. So if we have our own perception of reality, which is unique, and then the person that we're talking to has their own perception of reality in that conversation, and then if you're imagining what that person's thinking and what they're thinking about you, what we're thinking is actually so far removed from reality, it's ridiculous, because we're caught up in a perception of a perception of a perception, if that makes sense. So I found that really useful to think about when I first heard that quote, once I'd got my head around it, and apologies for fluffing that up. But we quite often get caught up in worrying about what other people think. When we're not mind readers, we don't know what people are actually thinking, but we make an assumption about what people are thinking. And I got caught up in this trap for years, and I did see a psychotherapist for a long time, and she said, a long time ago rather, and she said it would be much nicer if you actually allowed other people to make their own minds up about you, rather than you doing it for them. And that unlocked a lot of things for me, that we do tend to project what we think other people are thinking onto them, and we hold ourselves back as a result. So it's just useful to understand how our minds are working in those situations. Does that all make sense? Jolly good. So those kind of stories that we get caught up in can be, I'm not good at X, Y, or Z, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve this, I'm too thin, too tall, too fat, too whatever, or I just simply can't do these things. So these are all stories that we can tell ourselves. So I'm sure we've all got our own that we run quite constantly as favourites, and it's actually okay in this workshop to admit that you have voices in your head, because you're in good company, because I think we all do. We all have that little voice in our head that's telling us things. So and sometimes that voice can be so ingrained that we stop actually noticing what it's saying. It just becomes part of us. So some part of undoing all of this is actually acknowledging what those stories are that we tell ourselves. And once, what I say to a lot of my clients is, the first step to changing anything is being aware of it. So it's shining a light on those things that aren't, those stories that we tell ourselves that aren't supporting us. You can then start to do something about it. So again, I'd like you to do a quick exercise just to see if this helps unlock anything for anybody. But I'd just like you to write down what stories you've been telling yourself. So they could be beliefs that you have about yourself. So like that list I ran through, that I'm not good at X, Y, or Z, I'm not good enough, I don't deserve this, I'm too whatever, or I can't do X, Y, or Z, or I can't be X, Y, or Z. So I'll just give you a few minutes to actually just give you 2 or 3 minutes just to write down any stories that you've been telling yourself that are not true, or you may believe are true but are actually holding you back from the person that you want to be. And I think Sian's grinning because I don't think she has any left, actually. Okay.
I was just about to type that. I thought I'm struggling to do it. I can't do it.
Yeah, that's good. What we've
Yeah,
been doing has worked.
I was like, what am I going to write?
Okay, everybody written something down? Yep. Or people, do you need a bit longer, anybody? No? Okay, great. So I'm just going to put you into another breakout room. So again, if you're comfortable to share, and you may have a couple of things down, but if you just want to share one thing with the people that you're in the breakout room with, sort of what story you've been telling us yourself and what you've realised that how that's been affecting you, what it might be stopping you doing, if that's okay. Chantal's had to disappear, unfortunately. Okay, so is that all right with everybody? Yep. Okay, so we're an even number now, but I just need to figure out with technical difficulty who can go with who. In fact, I might end up having to do a group of 4 and a group of 3, if that's okay, just because I know Gurpreet and Patricia are struggling a little bit with technology. Okay, so sorry, just bear with me a second while I just move people around. Okay, right, so we've got a group of 4 and a group of 3, so I'll give you 2 minutes each, so to cater for the group of 4, so that's about 8 minutes. So I will see you again in about 8 minutes. Okay. Oh, we lost somebody. Oh no, they're coming back. Okay, good. Was that long enough for everybody? Yeah, okay, good. Is anybody happy to share one of the stories they've been telling themselves that they realise isn't true and hasn't been helpful? Sian's excused from this because she hasn't got any left. Anybody brave enough to share?
I'm happy to share.
Thanks, Lynn.
I was saying it was a bit of a funny one because Sean knows me and knows that I come across as really confident, and people say I'm the loud one, and I'm actually not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the conversation you had earlier about childhood, I was the really shy, the really quiet person at school, you know, with a very small, close-knit group of friends, etc. And I wasn't the best at everything, but I was good and I worked really hard, and I'm still that person. And I'm not the best at everything, but I work really hard. But I still tell myself that I'm not as good. And we talked about in the group the enormity of a task, for example. I always think, oh, I'm not going to be very good at that. Someone else will do that better. But everyone around me thinks Lynn's brilliant, she'll be able to do that, no problems. Because I go at 100 miles an hour, and I'm back to that people pleasing and doing lots of things, I don't think I am good at things, but I worry because other people think I am. So their expectations of me are way high. And I think I can only give them this much, but they're wanting this much because Lynn can produce this much. And I think, well, actually, no, I can't. You don't know me. You just think I can. Okay.
So what is it that stops you thinking that you can do whatever it is?
I think it does go back to that, you know, I didn't struggle, but I wasn't the best as a child. And I worked really hard. And I got that drive and passion to do what I wanted to do. So I had the confidence in that sense. But somewhere along the line, I became the loud person that I people perceive me as now, and I'm really not, you know. And in a group situation, you know, I will sort of talk, but I'm not the first person to talk because I am really quite shy. And I think I'm not fully valued for my contributions, particularly. I don't often feel that it's I get the value from some people. The people who I work really closely with, who will value and say, "Oh, thank you, that's great, you're so good." It can go the other way because the people who say, "Brilliant, you're so great, Lynn," I think, oh gosh, they think I'm brilliant and I'm not. Stop saying that, because I've now got to perform. You can't say the right thing to me if you don't say thanks, Lynn, that's great. I think, oh right, okay, you think I'm rubbish. And when the people say, Lynn, you're amazing, I go, no, I'm not. Stop saying that, because now you need this much from me. The pressure, so you can't win.
You're just being awkward then, aren't you?
I am being really awkward, but I do think it has come from that, being the sort of the shy, quiet one growing up. Not being the best, not being great. Did struggle with some things, and I think I still hold on to that bit. And inside, I still am that very shy, quiet, reserved person.
So when you say that you weren't the best at things, so what's the definition of best in your book then?
When I was in primary school, I was an amazing reader. I loved to read. I was brilliant. I couldn't do maths. I was terrible. I never got a handwriting pen because my handwriting was never good enough. And it was really clear in the way, I think that's why I became a teacher, because the way that I felt, not treated, that's the wrong word, but I didn't feel I was valued as a young girl. At secondary school, I did okay. I did well, but I didn't do amazingly. And I went to university, and that's where it changed, and I did really well.
Okay.
And I think that's where my personality changed, but I'm still holding on to the person who struggled and found it harder.
So just going back to when you said you were at primary school and you didn't think you were valued, could you just say a little bit more about what that means to you?
It was not by my family, they always thought I was brilliant, because I've got an older sister who was a pain in the bum and I was the quiet girl who was really well behaved, and I worked really hard, so they were always really proud. I mean, they were proud of her as well, but I really felt they were proud of me. But at school, it was sort of, oh, okay, well, yeah, Lynn, you haven't done that properly, that's not how you do it. And that not doing things to my best as well as I could have as well. You're not as good as some of the other children. That really stuck with me. And maybe unconsciously, it's why I went into the profession I did.
Yeah. So was that a teacher actually said that to you, that you're not as good as the other children?
Yeah, you can't have, I didn't get a pen. You can't have a pen. Your handwriting's not as good. And sort of the maths, you've got that wrong again. You've got that wrong again. You didn't listen. What did I tell you? And my mum was amazing at maths, and I'd go home and she'd say, what are they teaching you? This is how you do it. How can you not get that? How can you not understand? And I became the maths lead, and I was like.
But it's interesting looking back at some of the shocking teaching that used to happen, because I've got a story from when I was at school that sort of stuck with me. That teachers do actually say, or used to, I'm sure they still do, asking you and Sean, there's not so good teachers out there. But looking back as an adult and now as a teacher as well, can you see that teacher's behaviour was not right?
Yeah, and it's not till just now that I've realised that's where it came from.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, I just thought, well, yeah, I was a really quiet girl, and somewhere along the line I changed. And I think I changed because, I was good at what I was doing. Yeah, I might not be as quick as others. I might not get it as quickly. I kind of am a very visual learner. I need to see it. I need to write it down. And sort of now realise that it's the style of how, I think it's changed how I am with other people as well, not just children,
right.
But how I react with other people. They're not going to necessarily react or understand how I think they will.
Yeah.
So that has changed me, but that's also gone down the negative route, that you sometimes are apologising and trying to please everyone, and you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing what you know now as a teacher, if you did come across a pupil like that, how would you treat them if they weren't getting something in class?
I think listening to what a child's trying to say to you, or an adult even, listening to and taking time, not jumping in 2 feet and trying to fix the problem straight away, giving yourself time to get to know what that person needs and wants, and providing those opportunities for them to do that, to feel successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to you as a child, because obviously you've recognised that that's where it came from. So if you were given all of those opportunities, how do you think you would have thought about yourself differently?
Definitely, yeah, a lot more positive, I think. I wouldn't have felt that I was much slower at doing things. Obviously, it hadn't affected what I chose to do in life, because that part of me, that determination's always been there. But I probably would have been much more confident person in myself and how I was with friends and all my peers.
Yeah.
I'd have probably been a nightmare as an adult, because that confidence would have been huge. And so the glass half full bit is, I am confident, but I'm not. I have sort of grown into the person that I was meant to be, I think.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would feel to someone who's not like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I have got a confidence about me, but that's probably due to the experiences. But I still do hang on to the fact that I'm not as good.
So knowing what you know now, that it was not that you weren't good at those subjects at school, it was the teaching style that you'd got, which wasn't very good. How could you think differently about the work that you do in your work life now?
I think I'm an amazing teacher, to be big-headed. It's more this, it's adults. I think my issue is with it's not at home, it's not my family, it is work, and it's with people thinking that I can do it because I put on this persona that I can, and I can, but I still think for myself I just can't do it as well as someone else. They'll be better off doing that. But I can't get out of that. I don't know how to change that mindset.
So if you acknowledged that when you were a child you were good enough at those things, but there was an adult telling you that you weren't, apply that to your work life now, where because you adopted unconsciously that as a belief that you couldn't do things. If that's underpinning your work life now, does that seem any different, knowing that it was a story that you were telling yourself that you weren't any good?
No, because I wasn't very good at it. It was just the way I was supported, I think.
Exactly.
I probably would have been better at it had it been approached in a different way for me. If I was at school now, I probably would have fared better. So I still don't feel like as good at some things.
Okay.
As people think I am.
But do you see that's a belief that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah.
So looking back as an adult now, as a child, if you'd had the right support, you would have been as good as any of the other children in that school.
Yeah. Looking at where I've gone in life, I must have been. Otherwise I wouldn't be where I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that story that you're still telling yourself now, that you're not good at things, is it true?
No, absolutely not. No.
Okay. So, and how would things be different if you didn't have that belief? If you chose to ignore that belief and you believe that you were good enough at things?
This is completely the opposite now, because when I think this what I said just earlier is, would I be just awful and really bullshit and really, well, this is how you do it because I know best? Because I am very opinionated in a nice way, but I do think I do say you know, if somebody was, I don't know, if I thought somebody was upset with me at work and they were behaving a little bit funny, I would say, "Are you okay? Have I done something wrong?" If I feel like, you know, I've done it all and you've sat and done nothing, I'd say, "You can help, you know," but the way I sometimes say it is very direct. That's where I think the loud, confident persons come from. And so I try to make a joke of it, but I think it comes out the wrong way. So if I was that confident and thought I could do it, I could probably end up even worse. I don't want to do that. I don't want to scare people.
But because you haven't adopted that as a belief, you don't know how you will be at all yet, do you? That's
No,
imagined. Okay, so
yeah.
we'll park that. So but are you happy with having that feeling and those thoughts that you can't do something when people tell you you've done a good job?
Yeah, and I do think I need to be a bit more, actually, yeah, you can. And not comparing myself to, you know, the person next to me.
Yeah, because thinking back to when you were a child and that teacher was telling you weren't doing something, you got it wrong again, you weren't as good as the other children, was that bringing about you comparing yourself with the other school children at the time?
Yes, yeah.
So it sounds like it all definitely does all link back to that.
Yeah.
So now that you know that was all untrue, yeah, and that you could be different, is it okay to let that go?
Yes, yeah.
And how will you be instead?
I don't know. I don't want that. Yeah, I think
you don't have to be.
I mean, you know, I think I need to approach big things a bit more with confidence and think, well, okay, I can do that. Let's just break it down and think, where am I going to start with this, rather than a blind panic, thinking, gosh, this just seems too big. Let me avoid it because, you know, someone else will do that better. I think I need to just go, no, actually, you know what? Because I will stand on the sidelines, you know, and not do some of the things I want to do.
Yeah.
Because someone else is more confident to just take that away and do that rather than let me do that.
Yeah. And if you tell yourself that that's where the story came from, was when you were a kid, and that you can actually do it, and then just remind yourself of that when opportunities pop up.
Yeah.
Okay. Has that helped?
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Okay. Just 2 seconds. Just need to reply to a message from, oh, she's gone already. Capri's had to drop off, but she'd sent me a message. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that, Lynn. Okay, so the last thing that, has anybody got any questions, sorry, before we move on? Or has that all been straightforward so far? Yeah, okay. So the last thing that I want to cover is taking responsibility. So this is quite a big area when it comes to taking your power back, because as the story that I shared at the start, where I got to the point where my husband was speaking for me, I wasn't taking responsibility for my own well-being and my own sense of importance. So just to draw a distinction when I talk about responsibility, making the distinction between responsibility and blame before we talk about responsibility any further. Does anybody see those two things as the same thing, or do you understand that they're different? Yeah, kind of. Okay. Sorry?
I recognise the words as being something very different.
Yeah, but sort of the definition behind it kind of thing.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So being responsible for something means you're kind of stepping up, or you're holding yourself accountable for something, or somebody's holding themselves accountable for something. Whereas blame is about fault finding more. So it's just that distinction between responsibility is about accountability and stepping up, and blame being when you're finding fault with something, so you can point the finger at somebody, that kind of thing. Does that help make the distinction, Andrea?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, good. And the other thing about blame is it can keep you stuck, because if you're blaming somebody else for something, you're not stepping up to actually acknowledge that you can do something to change that situation. I'm not saying this applies to every situation, but the kind of things that we're talking about here. And responsibility encourages you to actually take action rather than being stuck. So that's just another distinction to make about the two as well, if that makes sense. Okay. So if the technology will allow me again, I just want to share my screen to show you something. So I'm sure you've all heard of cause and effect, but I'm just going to give you a slight different take on it in terms of what we're talking about tonight, and this will give you even more sort of information about taking responsibility for things. So you'll probably understand from the concept of cause and effect that cause is something that will start a reaction happening, and the effect is what's happened as a result of that reaction or action. That makes sense? Yeah, good. So in terms of what we're talking about in terms of people taking personal responsibility, if you're at the effect side of things and things are just happening to you, you'll probably end up having lots of reasons and excuses as to why you haven't got what it is you want in life. Okay. And if you're look a bit miserable like that, and if you are at the core side of things, so you're taking responsibility for your own action, you'll be getting the results that you want in life. Or you may get results, they may not always be what you want, but you are actually getting results that you've created. Okay. And ideally, you want to make sure that you're on the core side of things so that you're taking the action that you need to, and that will result in you feeling empowered. Because I'm sure if you all think about that concept, if you're in control and you're taking action, you're going to feel more empowered about what's going on in your life. So does that make sense? Okay, good. Let me stop sharing my screen. Now I found the button properly. Okay. And some people are at effect and they're blaming things around them and coming up with reasons as to why they haven't got things. And if they're happy having that in their life, then that's absolutely fine. But if you're not getting the results that you want out of life, then it can be a good idea to look at this model and find ways to actually do something about it. So what I normally advise anybody I work with to do is, if they find themselves in a situation where they are blaming things around them, so it could be that if you're in a miserable relationship, like I was a long time ago, that you're blaming your partner for everything being wrong. Or if you're at work and you're miserable in your job and you're blaming your employer, or in the family, if people keep falling out and you're always blaming your family for things going wrong. And again, this comes back to not actually blaming other people. In this situation that I'm going to describe to you, it's not about blaming those people. It's about what you can do to empower yourself. So rather than just pointing the finger and blaming everything on the world, it's about you taking the action that you need to get yourself out of it. So there are usually two questions that I advise people to ask themselves. And by asking yourself these questions, you'll immediately give yourself the action that you need to take, and you'll immediately put yourself at cause and put yourself in a position of taking responsibility for what you do. So those two questions are, how can I make this happen? Or what can I do to change this? So by asking yourself one of those questions, you will come up with an action that you need to take. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, I'm just going to give you a quick exercise to do, which probably won't take a genius to figure out what it is. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to think about a situation where you felt stuck, or you've been coming up with reasons as to why you haven't got what you want out of that situation, or you've been blaming somebody else, and ask yourself one of those two questions and see what action you come up with that you could actually take to help yourself out of that. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. Okay, everybody done that? People need a little bit longer, or is everybody finished? Yep, okay. So again, I'm going to put you into another breakout room just to have a talk through what situation it was and just one action that you could possibly give yourself to get out of that. Does that sound okay? So we're down to 6 of you, so I'm going to put you into 2 groups of 3, and again I'll give you about 2 minutes each, so I'll give you 6 minutes altogether. Okay, so I'll see you shortly. Everybody okay with that exercise? Yep, okay, good. Welcome back, everybody. So how was that? Is that good to share? Interesting things crop up? Anybody happy to share anything that cropped up?
I think that for me, it's about fear, isn't it? It's about failure in some of these things. I was just talking. I wrote my first novel, and ended up self-publishing because I wasn't able to get an agent.
Okay, that's good. Great stuff. Well done.
So that was great. So I pushed through with that. But I know that I've sort of self-published, and then all of my friends have bought the book. So I've sort of advertised through Facebook. But what I really need to do is promote it using other mechanisms, whether it's Instagram or, I don't know, other marketing opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess in the back of my mind, there's always been the fear that said, is it really good enough to put it out to the world?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind me asking what the topic of the book is?
It's a novel. It's a romance novel, essentially.
Yeah. Oh, great. Well done. I mean, even just writing all that down, because I used to know somebody who wrote for a living, and she said that whenever she published anything, it was like taking her clothes off in public, because you're exposing yourself for people to sort of look at you, because you, whatever the subject is, you put your heart and soul into that book. So first off, congratulate yourself for actually doing that and taking it. And a lot of people wouldn't be brave enough to actually even self-publish. So well done for that. And so can I ask you what feedback you've had off your friends?
Oh yeah, I've had brilliant feedback. They were first of all, a lot of them were surprised and said you kept that quiet.
Yeah.
But no, have had really good feedback.
That's good.
I don't know if they're just saying that because they're my friends. So there's always that sort of going on in the back of your mind. But yeah, it's been positive.
Yeah, that's good. And because you mentioned you had really good feedback. So I suspect if they thought it was just okay, or they didn't like it, they'd just say it was okay, or they liked it. But I think if you're getting enthusiastic feedback, which I expect you are, so people quite enthused and very, very positive about it.
Yeah, they would sort of talk about the story and say, "Oh, I was expecting this to happen. Oh, that, really surprised by that." And so it was nice to hear them talking about the characters in the book.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a good sign that people genuinely did like it, the fact that they're relating back to it. So I would take that as a massive positive, and I'd use that as a yardstick going forward. So, and if you ever write something like that, do you think it's going to appeal to absolutely everybody on the planet?
No.
And I think sometimes you just have to expect that not everybody's going to like it, but even if 1 or 2 people engage with it and like it, would that be enough to help you feel like it was a success?
Yeah, this far it has, yes. Yeah.
So knowing that you've had positive feedback about it so far, what is it that you're concerned about taking it further and promoting it further?
I guess it's just investigating what's the best route. And the two questions that you posed I thought was really good, because I know what I need to do. It's just getting on and doing it.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's just good, isn't it? I mean, I sort of rely on my husband quite a bit to sort of bounce ideas off him.
Yeah.
So I guess it's sitting down with somebody and saying, do you think this is a good route? So I don't particularly feel confident making that decision on my own.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's always helpful to have somebody to bounce those things off. And I guess a key part of it is finding out where your ideal audience is going to hang out. So that's probably the biggest thing, because once you've got that cracked, I think it will be easier to then get it in front of the people that will enjoy it. So is there anything else that's, apart from knowing you need to get on with it, so is there anything stopping you with just doing the getting on with it?
No, I guess in my mind to start with, it was more of a hobby. So, and I sort of accepted that if I didn't sell many copies, it was just great to say that I had actually written a novel.
Yeah.
But in the back of my subconscious mind, I'm thinking that's not really enough. You know, I do want to get it out there, and I do want to it better. But as I say, in the back of my mind, then it's that fear of failure.
Okay.
But as you said, you know, it's personal choice, isn't it? Not everybody likes.
Yeah, it won't please everybody.
Every genre, or it's about personal taste, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just need to do it, really.
Okay, that's good.
Just have the confidence, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got 6 other people here. So would you, in the chat, if you want to share the title of the book and where we can find it?
Okay. Okay. It's called Return to Kalymnos. And you can purchase it from Amazon.
Okay.
If you have an account.
And you can sorry.
It's in paperback form, and also you can download it onto a Kindle or a tablet. Great. Which is a lot cheaper. Yeah.
And how do you spell Kalymnos?
It's Kalymnos.
Brilliant. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. That was a bit of free marketing. Thank you very much, ladies.
I'm happy to help. So, I mean, going back to that, not pleasing everybody, because that's something, even as a coach, you kind of have to accept that I'm not going to be able to relate with everybody and provide help for everybody. And you kind of have to find your tribe, I think is one way of putting it these days. So it's just knowing where those people hang out. But great. If it's just a case of getting on with it, then yep, do it. Good stuff. Okay. So I realised there's something I forgot to tell you guys, so I'll come back to that in a second. But what I'd like you to do is just, you don't need to share this with everybody, but just decide on one of those actions that you wrote down, and then sort of make a commitment here to actually do that after the call over the next week or so. Does that sound okay to do? I think Andrea is definitely up for that, so that's good.
I am.
Okay. Any questions about that before I fill in the bit that I missed? No. Okay. The bit I forgot to tell you, which I know that Chantal's not on the call now, unfortunately, but it was something that she raised, is going back to the first of the 3 tips that I gave you, or strategies I gave you, about setting boundaries. It's once you've set those boundaries, how do you actually then start to enforce it if you've not actually done that before? So Sean will be used to me saying this, that I liken it to like flexing a muscle that is a bit underused or you've never used before, that you need to build it up gradually. So the first step I would advise you, rather than going in sort of causing arguments left, right and centre when you suddenly start demanding that people treat you with respect and kindness and all those lovely things, is just to start noticing where it's happening. So the people that you're talking to, the situations that you're in, where you're not putting your voice across or putting your point across, or you're not demanding that people treat you with respect or kindness, whatever it is. Start to notice where those situations are happening, because as I said earlier on, that awareness is the first step to changing things. So if you start to notice where that's happening, then on reflection in those situations, you can then start to think about how you could have handled it differently and what you might say, how you might handle it, that kind of thing. So hopefully that helps. And then over time, as you feel more comfortable with doing that, you can then start to put that into action. But I often find that's the best way to start off doing that, is just notice where it's happening and how you could do things differently. Okay. And also to point out that that's not to say that in every instance where somebody's encroaching on your boundaries that you do something about it, because in some cases it might just be easier to let it go. So don't become a bit of a demon about it and demand respect at all costs. But if you just do, you'll start to understand when it's a good time to just let things go and when it's time to stand up for yourself. And you'll normally find that that's a feeling that you get, and you'll start to recognize that feeling of when you really do need to do something about it. And sometimes in those situations, if you're not getting the respect you want, one way of actually dealing with it is just to take yourself out of the situation. So if people aren't treating you the way you want to be treated, even just walking out of the room or putting the phone down or whatever, I'm not saying just hang up, but end the conversation, can be an okay way of actually dealing with that, because even by not saying anything, just by your actions, you're actually telling people that that's not an okay way to speak to you or treat you. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So apologies, I've missed that bit out. I suddenly realised when you were in the breakout room that I hadn't told you that bit. So any questions about that? No. Okay. So one last thing. So I mentioned at the start that I wasn't going to tell you anything, but if anybody does want to carry on a conversation with me, then I'm offering that you can have a 90-minute session with me completely free of charge. We can talk about anything that we've covered tonight or anything else that you're feeling a bit stuck around. I'm more than happy to help. And then at the end of that call, if it's something you want to take further with me and we think it's a fit, we can talk about how that might work. But the important thing is that that call's there for you free of charge to do with what you want to. So to do that, I'm just going to pop a link in the chat so that you can book yourself into my diary. So I find this is the easiest way to actually do this, is that you, at a time that's convenient for you, you just book yourself into my diary for whenever's suitable. So there's the link if anybody wants it. And lastly is just to thank you for your time. As I mentioned, I've been recording this, so I'll send you a recording in the next couple of days if you want to look back over anything. One thing to point out, I have had feedback that sometimes the email I sent out ends up in your junk, so you may need to, if you haven't had it by Friday, I'd start to check your junk mail to see if it's hidden in there. But otherwise, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I've really enjoyed tonight. Okay, so if anybody's got any other questions, otherwise we're a few minutes early, but I'll end that, or end here rather.
No, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah,
Thank you.
So I hope you've all found it useful. Also, to let you know, I run these workshops once a month. The next one, I've run it a couple of times before, but I'm running one about self-sabotage, so you'll be more than welcome to come along to that one if you want to. But I hope you'll all book in with me, and I hope to see you soon on a conversation. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody, and thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye. Good to meet you all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.